I want to say thanks to everybody who sent in their questions this week. Feeling a bit flustered now. So anyway, I'll have a go. I've already been through them once, but I'll have a go at getting through them again. So the first question was from Leanne, a different Leanne than my friend, who I hope is going to let me know if she can hear me now. And Leanne wrote to me and said that she'd had a heart attack, which I'm really sorry to hear about, and that she'd been sent to the hospital dietitian who had told her not to eat red meat more than twice a week and to avoid saturated fat. So she switched to using the vegetable oils and soy milk, and she uses low-fat cheese. So the dietitian had told her that cutting out her saturated fat and her red meat would reduce her risk of having another heart attack. And she said to me in her email that that's the opposite of what I'm saying. And she just wanted me to, talk more about that. So what I've done is I'm going to share my screen because I put a couple of slides together from some graphs from Dr. Chris Kenobi. I'll just see if I can make this slideshow work. So Dr. Kenobi is really amazing. I had him on my podcast last year or the year before, and also with Tucker Goodridge. And both these people are experts in vegetable oils, and I'll get Andrew to republish the videos that I did with them, and so you can have another look at those. So Dr. Kenobi was an associate professor. He's a MD. He was an associate professor, I think, at Dallas University. He's a researcher. He's an ophthalmologist. He is the founder of the Age-Related Macular Degeneration Group Society. And he's also the author of a book, which I can't remember the full title, but it's something about ancestral diets and macular degeneration. Anyway, he has some quite interesting slides. So all the slides I'm about to share have come from his work. So just to let you know that. So this first slide shows us that, in the 1800s, 96% of our diet came from natural foods, from plant and animal source foods, not from processed foods. By the time we got to 2009, we were eating 63% of our diet from processed foods and only 37% from animal and plant foods. Now, this is US data, but New Zealand tracks very closely to the US, just same as the Australia and other Western countries do. So this graph was really interesting. This graph shows us the changes in heart attacks versus meat consumptions. So Leanne was worried about her red meat consumption, but so I particularly wanted to show this graph. So back in the 1800s, our total meat consumption was about 230 grams per head per day. And it decreased over time. And about 1912 was when the first heart attack occurred over here. And then in the 1930s, heart attacks started to become the leading cause of death. And they still are today. And we can see that total meat consumption had actually decreased during that time. And then heart attacks have continued to increase. And then the next graph is the fat intake. And we can see back, in the early 1900s, from this blue line was from animal fats. And we can see that our intake of animal fats kind of went up a little bit and then came down by 2009. we can see the green line, our intake of vegetable fats increased quite dramatically. And so that meant there was a dramatic increase in our total fats. But most of that increase has been from vegetable oils. And then in this graph, they've put together the combination of the saturated fat, the vegetable oils, and the heart disease deaths. So you can see the saturated fat has stayed fairly level all the way through. So this is from the 1900s up to 2020. And you can see the purple line, the vegetable oils are pretty stable. The saturated fat from animals are pretty stable. But you can see the vegetable oils started to dramatically increase. So around the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, when we started getting on this low-fat bandwagon, you can see the black line increases dramatically, and you can see that the heart disease deaths starts to increase dramatically as well. And so I think that's probably quite a telling graph. You know, it really shows us that it's really got nothing to do with the saturated fat, and it's got to do with other things that go on in our diet and our health. So seed oils, increase in processed foods, and then all the lifestyle environmental factors that we have as well. Now, this I thought was a great graph. This shows us that around, the mid-1950s, 1960s, the average person had 9.1% linoleic acid. So that's omega-6 fatty acids in their body fat. And in 2008, that percentage has increased to 21.5%. So that's a dramatic increase in a fairly short space of time. And then this graph is a study done on rats, fed diets containing different levels of linoleic acid, omega-6 and omega-3 acids. And in this graph, it shows that once the linoleic acid, once the omega-6 got up to 4.4% of their diet, the cancer risks dramatically increased. So that was for breast cancer tumours. So I hope you find that, I hope that was a bit of a useful share for you. And, I do suggest that you go and check out Dr. Chris Kenobi's work and Tucker Goodridge's work as well about that. Now, in terms of your heart disease and heart attacks, there are some other real major risk factors for heart attacks. So smoking is a significant risk factor. So if you're a smoker, that's probably one of the most profound risk factors you can have. The other risk factor is your waist to height ratio. So if you measure your waist and take your height and multiply your waist by 2, if it's more than your height, then you're storing too much visceral body fat. You're storing too much fat around your organs, and we really want to get that under less than half your height. So I think that is something that you could really, check and pay attention to and see if that's a problem. Now, the other markers, or the other kind of proxy markers for your risk of heart disease, are having high triglycerides. So when you do your blood tests and they do your cholesterol tests, if your triglycerides are over 0.9 or over 1, your fasting triglycerides, then that is a risk marker. And that's a bigger risk marker than having high LDL cholesterol, okay, or having high total cholesterol. Getting those triglycerides down lower is really important. And you want your triglycerides to HDL ratio to be 0.87 or less. So please, Leanne, feel free to send me your bloods. I'll have a look. I'm happy to pop them into a spreadsheet and share them if you're okay with that. Otherwise, you and I can just have a chat about them. Now, the reason that your triglycerides go up isn't because you're eating too much fat. It's because you're eating too many carbohydrates. So I've talked in previous weeks about what happens when you're consuming carbohydrates. We can only have 1 teaspoon of sugar in our blood at a time. And when we get more than that, we have to get it out of our blood and put it away somewhere safe. So we put some into our liver to use for later, and we put some into our muscles, which can only be used by our muscles. So if we fill up our muscle glycogen stores, we need to use our muscles to empty it out so we can fill it up again. And then anything surplus to that gets converted in our liver into triglycerides and goes and gets stored as body fat on our bodies. So that is something really important to take notice of. And if your triglycerides are high, I suggest you check your HbA1c, your fasting glucose, and especially your fasting insulin, because if your fasting insulin is high, then that is going to be indicating that you've probably got metabolic syndrome, pre-diabetes, that you've got too many carbohydrates in your diet, and that you're heading towards that insulin resistance situation. And then insulin resistance is a real risk factor for heart disease. And, you know, I was just talking about the linoleic acid and the vegetable oils and how they cause damage to those cholesterol transporters. So they cause damage to the LDL and the HDL, those vessels that carry the cholesterol around. They change our gene expression, they affect our cancer genes, and also the insulin and the glucose are very damaging to our blood vessels. So, you know, you kind of have this bombardment from all angles, which can cause a heart attack. So it's not just, are you eating too much red meat or are you eating too much saturated fat? Because that's probably got very little to do with the whole process. It's all these other things. So just a reminder for anyone tuning in or who hasn't heard this before, the cholesterol in our body is the same. It is one kind of cholesterol. So everyone talks about having good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, but we don't. We just have cholesterol. What happens is they are carried in different transporters around the body, okay? And those transporters are called VLDL, LDL, HDL. And we tend to think of those transporters as being good or bad, but they're not. They're all carrying out normal functions that are needed in the body. It's when those transporters get damaged by other things. So when those transporters get damaged by smoking, by too much sugar in the blood, by too much insulin, by too much iron, that's when we start to have problems. So there are tests you can do. There are advanced lipid panels. There's calcium scoring tests. There's all sorts of other tests you can do to check and just check on your risk. And blood pressure as well is another risk factor. All right, I hope that helped a little bit with that. For Dave and Paulette, who last week asked me about omega-6 oils and rapeseed oil, I just want to remind you that rapeseed oil is actually canola oil. It's very high in omega-6, and so it has a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. So don't let the food manufacturers trick you, because now that there's a whole lot of discussion about vegetable oils being toxic, they're changing the name. So they're going back to calling it rapeseed oil, just to try and make you think that it's healthier, but it's not. All right. My next question came from Sharon. And Sharon asked, how does the body process different types of foods, and how does this help with weight loss? So Sharon, what you're talking about is the oxidative priority of the body. And I'm going to share my screen again, and hopefully I can find it for you. So I have a PDF called Nutrient to Energy Reset, and this explains about the oxidative priority of the body. This is part of my online training program, one of the resources, but I will get Andrew to pop it up on the website so that anyone can go and have a look at it if they want to have a read about this. But basically, our body prioritizes how the order in which it uses the food that we eat. So I'm going to talk about alcohol. I'm not going to worry so much about the ketones, but I'll talk about alcohol, protein, carbohydrate, and fat. And the reason I'm not going to talk about the ketones is because these are exogenous ketones. So this is when you are putting MTC oil or you're putting some kind of keto oil into your drink or food to boost your ketones. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about alcohol, protein, carbohydrates, and fat, because that's what most of us do. Now, alcohol is very toxic to our body, so we want to get rid of it as fast as we possibly can and detoxify it. So our liver and our body will process alcohol first. And so when it processes the alcohol, while it's processing the alcohol, we'll have an energy buildup in our bloodstream, mostly from carbohydrates and fat. So protein doesn't really contribute very much to our energy, but we'll have carbohydrates and fats kind of building up in our bloodstream because we don't have a storage system for alcohol. So we process the alcohol, use the calories for that, put them through the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, and then we come to protein. So again, we don't really store protein in our body. We don't really use it for energy. It can get converted into glucose through gluconeogenesis, and in certain situations, we can use a little bit of it for energy when we need to. But just as a general principle, we don't really store protein as energy. What we do is we store the amino acids from protein in our muscle and then in our other tissues that need them. And remember, our whole body is made up of protein. Our body depends on protein for its function and survival. In general, any excess protein we eat is excreted. So people are always worrying about eating too much protein, and in general, that's not really a problem. You normally get full, you stop eating it before you can really overconsume it, because it's very satiating. So, and then any protein that your body doesn't need to use will be excreted. So that then brings us to the carbohydrates and fats. So we can only have that 1 teaspoon of sugar in our blood with the carbohydrates. And so when we eat carbs, so if you're eating 30 grams of carbs a meal, say, then that is, sort of 5 or 6 teaspoons of sugar in your blood, or maybe even a bit more. Now, Sue's trying to help me. And so we've got to get rid of those surplus teaspoons of sugar. So like I said before, they go into your liver glycogen, your muscle glycogen, and then the excess gets converted into body fat and it gets stored as fat in the tissues. So your body will deal with that carbohydrate first, because having too much sugar in your blood is dangerous, and that's what makes us sick. So just like it gets rid of the alcohol, then it will get rid of the carbohydrate. And then we have fat. So fat is quite safe, all right? Fat's fairly steady. We process fat through a different system. So it goes through the hepatic portal vein, and it gets stored in our body as body fat, which is a real safe place generally to lock it away and keep it out of the bloodstream, so the bloodstream doesn't have too much energy in it. So I want you to think about going out for a meal. So let's say you go out for dinner and you have a glass of wine or a couple of glasses of wine, and you have some meat or fish, and then you have, some potato or rice and some vegetables, and then you have a lovely dessert, with some, something sweet with some cream or ice cream. I want you to think about how your body has to work to process that. It's got to try and burn and dispose of the alcohol first. All right, the amino acids will do their thing and take care of themselves. But now in your bloodstream, you've got all these carbohydrates and all this fat in there together. And that's going to stimulate an insulin reaction, okay? So your insulin's going to go up to try and help deal with all that energy in your bloodstream. And then you're going to start storing it in your body fat and body tissues. Then if you keep on eating, if you have a break or for a little while and then you keep on eating, you're going to keep that insulin really high and you're not going to let it back out of your body fat. So that is really what the oxidative priority is. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's about making a choice about what you're going to eat when. So are you going to eat carbohydrates or are you going to eat fat? So in nature, we find carbohydrate foods with protein and we find fat foods with protein. We very rarely find carbohydrates and fat together. We find them in nuts and seeds, and we find them in breast milk, and or in milk. So they're very fattening. Milk is designed to, fatten young baby animals, make them grow, and nuts and seeds in the natural world only have a short season, so we don't have access to them all the time. So they were available to our ancestors, and not all our ancestors, just those who lived in certain areas. They were available to help fatten us up so we could survive through the winter. But generally, we only find carbohydrates with protein or fat with protein because we have the system where it's better that we eat either one or the other, that we're not eating carbs and fats together. And what we're finding, and that's what we saw in that first series of slides I showed you from Chris Kenobi, where now we have all these high energy fats from the seed oils, and we have all this added sugar making processed food, and we're eating all that together. And then we're wondering why we're getting sick, struggle to lose weight, and our body systems are falling down. So I hope that was a reasonable explanation. Let me know if you have any other questions. I'll just check and see if hopefully my live is working. I'll just have a quick look and see if anybody is on or asking questions. No, I can't. Any other questions? I'll just check and I can't. Good, great. Okay, so Leanne says she can hear me. Thank you, Leanne. And Barbara is watching. So lovely to have you on board, Barbara. Please let me know if those explanations need a little bit more clarifying. It's my third attempt at this today, and I feel like I'm starting to babble a little bit. All right. My next question is from Roger, and Roger asked, is weight loss about calories in versus calories out? And that is a fantastic question, and that's another question that has all the experts out there arguing away. And in my opinion, both sides are right. So yes, we do have energy balance. If we take in more calories than we use in our body, then obviously we're going to gain weight, all right? But it's not a direct measure. It's not a matter of, we put in 2,000 calories and we burn 2,000 calories. It's what happens to those calories when they are in our body. And calories affect our hormones, which we've just been talking about. So we've been talking about insulin. So calories affect a whole lot of different systems. We're talking about that oxidative priority. So we're talking about the order they get burned in. So, if you put in carbohydrate calories, they're going to be dealt with differently than fat calories will be dealt with. So we don't want to be consuming more calories than we need, but rather than calories, I prefer to use the word energy. So I think of food as having nutrients on one side, and nutrients are our proteins, that are our animal source proteins that have all the amino acids or those vitamins and minerals that we absolutely need for our health. On the other side, we have energy coming in from carbohydrates or fats. And I think that it's best to try and separate them. If you're going to eat a high fat meal, it's best to keep your carbs really low. If you're going to eat a high carb meal, it's best to keep your fats really low, just so you don't confuse the body. And then that should make it easier for your body to actually use those calories. So I hope that helps. Is weight loss about calories in versus calories out? I guess that's the question. I mean, ultimately, in some ways, we look at calorie restriction. So people have always gone on diets, so they cut their calories back. And there's a lot of problems with that, because there becomes a point where we can't calorie restrict anymore. We calorie restrict too seriously. Lots of diets out there about 800 calories a day, 1200 calories a day. We go into starvation mode. So we start kind of eating up our own body. We devouring our own protein stores, our muscle. We start breaking down our neurotransmitters. We start breaking down our gut digestive system to access the nutrients that we need. And our metabolism does slow down. So there's a lot of kind of interesting research being done that calorie restriction does help extend life, so it's good for longevity, but just how much? Where do you flick over into starvation? And then when you do flick over, what happens to your stress hormones? What's happening to your cortisol? What's happening to your adrenaline? And what are they doing to actually help preserve your weight? What happens to your thyroid? As your thyroid start kicking in, trying to preserve your weight. So you've got to find that right balance. So the quality of the calories, and then how much energy is coming in, and then making sure that you're keeping those hormones really stable, because it's the hormones that kind of drive all that system. All right. Sorry, I didn't make a note of who sent this question in, but the question was, what are healthy snacks for weight loss? I'll just check and see if there's no more questions live. So what are healthy snacks for weight loss? Now, this is a really, really good question. And again, it comes back to kind of what kind of foods we're eating, what's happening with our blood sugar, what's happening with our insulin and fat storage, and, how often we need to be eating. So there's been a mindset out there for a long time that, we need to be eating sort of 3 meals and 2 snacks a day, and we should be eating every, 2 or 3 hours to keep our metabolism fired up and to keep our blood sugar stable. And we now know that that's actually not accurate. That's kind of not how it works. Our body runs on a circadian rhythm, a circadian system, and every organ in our body has its own kind of circadian rhythm that switches on and switches off based on different stimulus. So, light and dark stimulate our wake sleep cycle. And we have a digestive circadian rhythm as well. So when we eat, we set off this digestive circadian rhythm. And part of that is in our gut, we have this system called the migrating motor complex. So many people have gut issues, constipation, diarrhea, maybe both. And our migrating motor complex is designed, it's kind of like our chimney sweep for our gut. It gets things moving. It has a job to do to keep the food passing through and keep us regular. And when we eat, we turn off the migrating motor complex. And so we need a gap of at least 4 hours between meals for that to switch on and start doing its job. So if we're going to be eating every 2 or 3 hours and just having a snack, and we're having an apple here and a piece of cheese over there or some cheese and crackers or something, we're not allowing our digestive system to work properly. So the other thing I would say about that question is, if you're hungry, so if you've had breakfast and you feel this burning desire to eat within 4 hours, then we really need to look at the composition of your breakfast. Did you have enough protein in it? And did you have enough fat in it? Because those are going to be what keeps you full, keeps your blood sugar stable, and allows you to last for that period of time during the day. So if you're having a breakfast of cereal, low-fat milk, and a banana, you might, like we keep talking about today, you can only have 1 teaspoon of sugar in your blood at any one time. So your body's going to empty your bloodstream of that energy really quickly, or as quickly as it can. And then you're going to feel hungry again. Your brain's going to get some messages saying, my bloodstream's empty of sugar or of energy, I need more food. So the idea would be then to eat foods that satisfy you for a lot longer, that keep you not hungry for a lot longer. So I'd suggest increasing your protein for breakfast. We know that that's really important. A real food if possible, but things like full-fat Greek yogurt with a scoop of whey protein powder can be a really good way to start for a lot of people who may not want to face bacon and eggs or meat patties or, that kind of thing. So that can be a good option just to kickstart you. Make sure it's full-fat Greek yogurt with the protein powder, and then you could have a few berries or something like that with it. If you want to. So that can be a good way to start your day, or you can turn that into a smoothie. But start the day with when you break your fast, and it doesn't matter, whether you break it at 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock, when you break that fast, make sure you've got that protein. Then try to go for 4 hours before you have your next meal. And then again, make sure the basis of that meal is protein. And then if you want to have salad or, depending on whether you want to go kind of like down more plant-based foods or more animal fats, you can choose. And then try and take a break until dinner time. And then the other thing to help reset the circadian rhythm is give your gut at least 12 hours at night. And we know that that's really important. So you want no food, no calories coming in, no energy coming in for 12 hours. So you can drink water, but try and do 12 hours. So it might be from 8 at night to 8 in the morning. But do your best to do 12 hours without eating. Want to switch on your fat burning, switch on that metabolic flexibility so you can switch between fuel sources quite easily. Next question was from Joanne. Joanne said she's a yo-yo dieter, and how can she make long-term changes to her diet without falling off the wagon all the time? And she said she does motivation, mindfulness, a lot of personal development, but it only helps for a short period of time. It's not helping long term. Joanne, I hear your pain, okay? There are so many people out there who struggle with this. And a fantastic question, and it's come at a really opportune time, because I was just talking to my friend Leanne a couple of days ago pretty much about this, and I was talking to another friend, Tian, about this last night. Both Leanne and Tian are really good at the neuro change, the mindset, you know, how we rewire and reprogram our brains, and the strategies that we can use to do that. And they have wonderful insights into that. And I was having a conversation with them about the fact that one of the problems that I see is that we need to have proper neurotransmitter balance to do that. So we need all those neurotransmitter hormones to be operating optimally in order for us to rewire those brain circuits that we're attempting to do through all the personal development and personal growth things that we're doing. So without having the proper hormones, we can't actually rewire those new neurological patterns. And we end up in a vicious cycle because we don't rewire the patterns permanently. And so then we don't eat properly and provide the building blocks for the neurotransmitters. So then we can't make the neurotransmitters. And so we keep going in this vicious cycle. So, you know, somewhere we have to do some stuff that's really hard. And this is where I think we need to make sure we eat those nutrients. We need to make sure that we get them in our diet. And I encourage people, let's stop worrying so much about the bad stuff that you're eating. Let's stop beating ourselves up about having an ice cream or having some chocolate or some chippies or whatever it is, whatever your poison is. You know, whatever you have to feel better and reward yourself and soothe yourself. Stop worrying about that and make sure that before you eat that, you're getting those good animal foods and those good animal fats into your diet so that you are feeding your neurotransmitters. We need your dopamine, your serotonin, your melatonin, and a whole lot of other neurotransmitters need to be functioning properly so that your brain chemicals can rewire those new patterns for you. And so that's really, really important. So I think if you are kind to yourself, are forgiving to yourself, but also set some expectations for yourself, you know, make sure that, you know, have some hard-boiled eggs and some cheese and some chicken drumsticks or whatever it is you like in the fridge, and get those into you before you kind of fall off that wagon and have that, you know, start eating that cake or whatever it is. And look, we all do it. I'm just as guilty as anybody else. So I'm not sitting here claiming to be perfect about the stuff, or that I don't have bouts of just, you know, someone brings me a few bickies or a piece of cake and I just sit down there and, you know, scoff the whole lot. It's embarrassing. You feel like, oh, what's happened to my self-control? But I don't think it matters too much, you know, if you just try and keep that hormone balance really good. Don't beat yourself up about it and just start again. And I always talk about never miss twice. So, you know, if you messed it up once, don't worry. You've got the next meal that's coming. You've got dinner or breakfast, whatever. Just eat properly for dinner or breakfast. And, you know, I always kind of share a little anecdote about, you know, imagine if you miss a shower for a day or two, you know, for some reason you're not able to have a shower. You never say, oh, that's it, I can never have a shower again. You just go and get in the shower at the first opportunity. Yet when we do what we think is making a mistake with our diet, when we think we've got it wrong, you know, we go, oh, that's it, all done now, wasted, I'm hopeless. We have all this negative talk back to ourselves, criticizing ourselves. I can never do this. I knew I could never do this. And we get into that cycle instead of just saying, okay, well, so I had some cake, big deal. Next meal, I just go back and I just eat normally. So anyway, I don't know. I hope that helps a little bit. And my final question today was about exercise. What's the best exercise for weight loss? And that's another really good question. And of course, there are lots of different ways to exercise. And I think one of the things we need to do, and something that I've been talking about for years, is the difference between exercising for health and exercising for performance. So lots of people think, I need to lose weight. How do I get myself motivated to do some exercise? I know exercise is good for me. So they go and join, you know, a challenge or do a marathon or a half marathon or a bike ride or something. Because they're looking for some external motivation and a goal that they can achieve. But that kind of exercise is exercise for performance, and it has a very different impact on our body than exercising for health. So exercising for health involves all the different kinds of things that our bodies need to do. Now, before I forget, I'm going to mention Nick Terminello here. Nick Terminello is a friend of mine who is a super exercise personal trainer, and he has a whole lot of books out there, a whole lot of guidance out there, and you could go and check him out. I think I did a podcast with him a couple of years ago as well. You could go and check him out, and you know, he's got books on exercise for fat loss and strength for women and all sorts of things. And then also Dan John. Dan John is one of my favorite people in the world, has been a great mentor for me over my life. And he has Dan John University, and you can go and plug into that, and his site will help generate kind of exercises based on what your needs are, what you want to achieve. So I just want to mention those people. But with exercise, we need some exercise for our heart, for our cardiovascular system. So, you know, walking is a good exercise, cycling, if you're a swimmer and enjoy swimming, that's good. If you like getting out and playing some sports or some tennis, all that kind of stuff is fantastic. You don't have to run, but if you enjoy running, you can do a little bit of running so long as you can do it safely without injuring yourself. Don't feel like you have to run to burn calories, because cardiovascular exercise, it's not about burning calories. It's just about helping your heart to function better, improving that lung capacity, and it's really good for those neurotransmitters in your brain. Then we need muscle exercise. So again, you don't have to go to the gym and be a bodybuilder and think that you've got to lift all these huge heavy weights, but you do want to build some muscle. You want to maintain muscle as much as you can as you get older. You know, I used to, you know, sort of aim to get stronger. Now I'm aiming to try and stay where I was. It is so easy to lose your muscle. So, you know, some really good basic exercises, some squats and some deadlifts and some, you know, some sort of row and some sort of pushing exercise, push-ups or something, or cable presses or band presses. You can keep it as simple as you like. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be long, but you need to be keeping those muscles strong. We want to maintain that muscle function that helps preserve us from osteoporosis, helps preserve bone density. Muscle burns a lot of calories, right? So when you go for a run and you stop running, you stop burning energy, but muscle continues to keep burning energy for 24 hours later. So, you know, some sort of resistance training is really important. And then some sort of mobility work. So mobility work is sort of a little bit different than flexibility. So you can stretch, you can do yoga, you can do Pilates, you can do those kinds of things. But mobility work really means taking all your joints through their full range of movement, which is really, really important for our health. And I think if you do the right kind of exercise, the right kind of resistance exercise, then you're kind of almost automatically doing that. So things like deadlifts, squats, overhead presses, some sort of row, chin-ups, you are getting those joints through their full range of movement. And then you can do some flexibility, like I said, yoga, and then recovery. So, some foam rolling. You don't need to exercise every day, making sure you have a break from it. Cycling your exercise, so it gets harder, and then you have a downward trend and you recover, and then you can do a little bit more. Having periods of changing what you're doing, really important. People just kind of get stuck in the same mindset, doing the same thing over and over again. They don't listen to their bodies, start getting injured. They start accumulating fatigue. They don't recover enough, and then they feel their performance is dropping off, and then they're like, oh, I've got to go harder and harder and harder, instead of actually backing off and reassessing, and maybe having different times of the year for doing different things, or putting an emphasis onto different things. And while I'm talking about awesome people, I'm going to talk about Joel Jamieson, another fantastic mentor. Joel is probably the best exercise physiologist I've certainly come across, and he has 8 weeks out Morpheus. So he's been working for years on a heart rate variability monitor, which is how I first came across him many, many years ago. Now, there's a lot of heart rate variability options out on the market, but Morpheus is particularly good because Morpheus, you use Morpheus in the morning, and Morpheus tells you your readiness to exercise. So red, orange, green, I think, or blue, red, orange, green, I think it is. And so that doesn't mean that you don't necessarily train, but it tells you, okay, maybe if you're in the red and you've been in the red for a couple of days, maybe you need to back off your training. Maybe you need to have a bit more recovery. Maybe you need to do some shorter sessions. Maybe it's telling you you're going to come down with something. And it doesn't only reflect your training, it reflects your whole lifestyle. So if you haven't slept well, if you've had an argument with someone, if your heart rate is up a little bit higher or down a little bit lower, it really measures your parasympathetic and sympathetic systems, and then it gives you some feedback. So for those of you who are a bit more interested in your exercise and wanting to enhance your performance, I definitely recommend checking out Joel. Check out Morpheus and HRV. All right. Okay. Well, take 3. I hope that this has recorded. I hope there's been some volume, and I hope it's been live on Facebook. Thanks everyone for all the amazing questions. I'm looking forward to getting more this week. So please keep sending them in. You can send them to susan@susanbirch.co.nz, or just private message me on my Facebook page, and I will talk to you next Wednesday.